What a good day! This is the last group of BS Ed Math 3B. Before we start, we want to share first the application that we used here. This is the Hanoi Tower. You can download this on Google Play Store. So, first, as you can see, on the left upper corner, we have the time. Next to it is the moves. And on the right upper corner, we can see the 0/7, or that is the least move that we need to solve the puzzle. Tower of Hanoi is a puzzle involving 3 vertical pegs and a set of different sized discs with holes through their centers. The bottom of the disc on initial peg is the largest, and on the top of it is the smallest one. The main goal of this game is to move the disc from left pole to the right pole with least number of moves. Since the application that we are using right now gave us the least number of moves on the right upper corner, we can focus on the process to solve it. We only have two rules here. First, only individual discs may be moved, or it means we cannot move two or more discs at the same time. And no disc may be placed on the smaller disc. So, we can only place the smaller disc at the top of large disc, but we cannot put large disc at the top of the smaller one. So, let's start. Here we have 3 discs. And our main goal here is to put these 3 discs on the third pole with only 7 moves. So, let's try. First, let's put the first disc on the middle, the second disc on the third pole, the first disc on the third pole, the third disc on the middle, the first disc on the middle, the second disc on the first pole, then let's put it there, the third disc on the third pole, then let's put it there, the second disc on the third pole, and okay. As you can see, when I drop this, we can achieve the goal to put the disc on the third pole, but the least moves that we can do here is 7 moves only. So it means that there is much better way. So let's reset. So let's try to put this first disc on the third pole, the second disc on the middle, the first disc on the middle, the third disc on the third pole, the first disc on the first pole, the second disc on the third pole. When I drop this, the total number of our moves is 7, and that is our goal. Therefore, our second process is much better than the first one. Since we're done explaining the mechanics of the game, we can now proceed to the next level, and that is for this. While we are solving the puzzle from level 4 to level 8, you can also try to observe the pattern on each level. And on level 9, we will explain our group observation and the mathematics behind it. So, without further ado, let's play the game. Hi, welcome to level 4. Here, the least number of moves is 15, and I will show you the process of it. Our first move here is to put the first disc on the middle rod. Then, the second disc on the third rod. Our next goal here is to put the first disc at the top of the second disc. So, let's put first disc on the third rod. Then, move the third disc on the second rod. The next thing we need to do is to put the second disc at the top of the third disc. So when we put our first disc here on the middle rod, we will interfere the second disc to move on the top of the third disc. So we need to put our first disc first on the first rod, so we can freely put the second disc on the middle rod. Then let's put the first disc on the middle rod. The next thing we need to do is to move the fourth disc on the third rod. Then let's move the first disc on the top of the fourth disc. Then let's move second disc on the first rod. Let's move the first disc on the first rod. Let's move the third disc on the third rod, and let's move the first disc on the middle rod. Let's move the second disc on the third rod, and the final move is to put first disc on the third rod. And that's it. We moved the fourth disc to the third rod with 15 moves only. We can now proceed to the next level.
Good day everyone. So today let's do the Tower of Hanoi. We are now in level 5. Our task is to move all the 5 discs in the third rod in a proper arrangement just like in the first rod. So let's start. Now let's move the first disc to the third rod and the second disc to the second rod. And let's move again the first disc to the second rod. And the third disc move to the third rod. And the first disc again move to the first rod. And the second disc move to the third rod. And the first disc again move to the third rod. And the fourth disc move to the second rod. And the first disc again move to the second rod. And the second disc move to the first rod. And the first disc again move to the first rod. And the third disc move to the second rod. And the first disc move to the third rod. And the second disc move to the second rod. And the first disc again move to the second rod. And the fifth disc move to the third rod. And the first disc again move to the first rod. The second disc move to the third rod. And the first disc again move to the third rod. And the third disc move to the first rod. And the first disc again move to the second rod. And the second disc move to the first rod. And the first disc again move to the first rod. And the fourth disc move to the third rod. And the first disc again move to the third rod. And the second disc move to the second rod. And the first disc again move to the second rod. And the third disc move to the third rod. And the first disc move to the first rod. And the second disc move to the third rod. And last move, the first disc move to the third rod. That's all. Thank you.
Let's get started, and I'll be calling the pole rod. First, the first disc to the second rod. The second disc to the third rod. First disc, third rod. Third disc, second rod. First disc back to first rod. First disc will be on the second rod, and the fourth disc will be on the third rod. Okay, so let me tell you a hack. If you notice, the smallest ring always moves to the same direction. And whenever that happens, the disc below it will move backwards. And if there's no disc on the other tower, move the piece to the opposite end, but continue to move in your direction. Continue the pattern until the puzzle is solved. That's easy, right? But this trick doesn't always work. Different number of discs has different patterns. That's all. Thank you.
We are now in level 7. Our task is to put all the discs in the third rod in a proper arrangement from 1 to 7. So, what do you think is our first move? Since we end up in an odd number, we will put the first disc to the third rod. Then, the second disc to the second rod. Then, we will put the first disc to the second rod. Then, we will put the third disc to the third rod. Then, we will put the first disc to the first rod. We will put the second disc to the third rod. We will put the first disc to the third rod. We will put the fourth disc to the second rod. We will put the first disc to the second rod. We will put the second disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the first rod. We will put the third disc to the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the third rod. Then we will put the second disc to the second rod. We will put again the first disc to the second rod. Then we will put the fifth disc to the third rod. We will put the first disc to the first rod. We will put the second disc to the third rod. We will put the first disc to the third rod. Then we will put the third disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the second rod. Then we will put the second disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the first rod. Then we will put the fourth disc to the third rod. Then we will put the first disc to the third rod. Then we will put the second disc to the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the second rod. Then we will put the third disc to the third rod. We will put the first disc to the first rod. Then we will put again the second disc to the third rod. The first disc to the third rod. Then we got the number 6 disc. We will put this disc in the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the second rod. Then we will put the second disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the first rod. We will put the third disc to the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the third rod. Then we will put the second disc to the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the second rod. Then we will put the fourth disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the first rod. We will put the second disc to the third rod. Then we will put the first disc to the third rod. We will put the third disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the second rod. Then we will put second disc to the first rod. Then we will put the first disc to the first rod. And then we will put the fifth disc to the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the third rod. Then we will put the second disc to the second rod. Then we will put the first disc to the second rod. We will put the third disc to the third rod. Then we will put the first disc to the first rod. Then we will put the second disc to the third rod. The first disc to the third rod. And the fourth disc to the second rod. The first disc to the second rod. The second disc to the first rod. The first disc to the first rod. Then the third disc to the second rod. The first disc to the third rod. The second disc to the second rod. The first disc to the second rod. And now we get the seventh disc. We will put it to the third rod. Then the first disc to the first rod. The second disc to the third rod. The first disc to the third rod. The third disc to the first rod. Then the first disc to the second rod. The second disc to the first rod. The first disc to the first rod. The fourth disc to the third rod. The first disc to the third rod. The second disc to the second rod. The first disc to the second rod. The third disc to the third rod. Then the first disc to the first rod. The second disc to the third rod. Then the first disc to the third rod. Then the fifth disc to the first rod. The first disc to the second rod. The second disc to the third, the first, to the first rod. The first disc to the first rod. The third disc to the second rod. The first disc to the third rod. The second disc to the second rod. The first disc to the second rod. The fourth disc to the first rod. Then the first disc to the first rod. The second disc to the third rod. The first disc to the third rod. The third disc to the first rod. The first disc to the second rod. The second disc to the first rod. The first disc to the first rod. The sixth disc to the third rod. the first disk to the third rod, the second disk to the second rod, the first disk to the second rod, the third disk to the third rod, the first disk to the first rod, the second disk to the third rod, the first disk to the third rod, the fourth disk to the second rod, then the first disk to the second rod, the second disk to the first rod, the first disk to the first rod, the third disk to the second rod, then the first disk to the third rod, the second disk to the second rod, the first disk to the second rod, the fifth disk to the third rod, the first disk to the first rod, the second disk to the third rod, the first disk to the third rod, the third disk to the first rod, then the first disk to the second rod, the second disk to the first rod, then the first disk to the first rod, then the fourth disk to the third rod, then the first disk to the third rod, the second disk to the second rod, the first disk to the second rod, the third disk to the third rod, the first disk to the first rod, and the second disk to the third rod, and the first disk to the third rod. And we're done!
Now let's move on our generalization.
Hi guys, I'm Daniela Bonus and today I will teach you the secret on how to get the lowest number of moves in Hanoi Tower. Always remember that this one is the most important here. Your first move has an effect in the whole level. If your total number of this is an odd number, then your first move or your this one should be put at the last rod. And if your total number of this is an even number, then your first dish should be in the middle rod. And the secret is one should not ever be on the top of the odd number. So let's start. So our total number of this here in this level is 9, which is an odd number. So we will put our this one at the last rod. So as we mentioned earlier, this one should not ever be on the top of the odd number. So it should be on the top of 2 and 3 it should be at the last rod. So our choices is 4 and 3. So 4 is an even number, so we will put our one at the fourth, on the top of the fourth disk. See how we're not putting the one at the top of the odd number. as you can see in this level, our total moves is only 511. These are the things we observed during our solving the Tower of Hanoi. The most important is the this one. If you put the this one in a wrong position, it will increase the number of your moves. If your first move is strong, it is now impossible for you to get the least number of moves. So how can you know if your first move is strong or right? If your total number of these is an odd number, then your first move or this one should be at the last rod. And if it's an even, then this one should be at the middle rod. You only have to observe this one, which it should be only on the top of even number this. By doing the activity, we also observe a pattern which called a recursive pattern. In order to find the least number of moves, first thing you do, transfer n-1 disc to a rod B. So, as you can see in our upper part of presentation, we have a 3 disc. So, 3 minus 1 is 2. So, we're going to move 2 discs into a rod B. To transfer 1 disc left from rod A to rod C. And lastly, transfer n-1 from rod B to rod C. So by doing that, we get 7 moves. Now, let's try to make that recursive pattern to a mathematical formula. So let's start in a 1 disc. M of 1 is equal to 1 or move of 1. And we have a disc 2. Or M of 2 is equal to 3. As you can see in the, if we have 3 discs and we use the recursive pattern n-1 and put the n-1 in, to rod B, then it's the step we made is just same in M of 2. So we can suggest a formula that 2 multiplied by M of 2 plus 1. So that is equal to 7 steps. If we have 4 discs, it's just same move as we made in N of 3 or as we made in if we had a disc 3. So our recursive formula now is M of n is equal to 2 multiplied by M of n minus 1 plus 1. Let's try it again in 5 discs. So we move the 4 discs into a rod B. And apply the formula, which is 2 multiplied by M of 4 plus 1 is equal to 2 multiplied by 15 plus 1, and we made it 31 moves. So this is the summary of this number of moves. So before we proceed, let me ask you a question. Can we use the recursive formula in finding the step in 100 discs or 1000 discs? The answer is yes. However, it is a difficult for us because you have to know first the move in 99 discs to get the move in 100 discs. So we can apply here the mathematical induction. So let's note that m of n equal to 2 raised to n minus 1 is our formula. So let's try if our hypothesis is true, or let's prove our hypothesis true. If n equal to 1, then m of 1 is equal to 2 raised to 1 minus 1 is equal to 1. So let's try if in our m of 2. Two raised to 2, that is 4 minus 1, and 3, which is also this one. Then if m of 3, 2 raised to 3, that is 8 minus 1 equal to 7, which is, and you can also check or just substitute. Then our next step is assume that n equal to k is true. So m of k is equal to 2 raised to 1 minus 1. So to show that for n equal to k plus 1, then we have to choose 2 raised to k plus 1 minus 1 equal to m of k plus 1 minus 1 plus 1. And we just have to manipulate the formula, and our answer is 2k plus 1 minus 1 is equal to 1 plus k minus 1, which is true. So our formula is proven.